221. The Wolf and the Lamb. A wolf saw a lamb drinking at a stream and wanted to devise a suitable pretext for devouring it. So, although he was himself upstream, he accused the lamb of muddying the water and preventing him from drinking. The lamb replied that he only drank with the tip of his tongue, and that, besides, being downstream he couldn't muddy the water upstream. The wolf's stratagem having collapsed, he replied, "But last year you insulted my father." "I wasn't even born then," replied the lamb. So the wolf resumed, "Whatever you say to justify yourself, I will eat you all the same." This fable shows that when some people decide upon doing harm, the fairest defense has no effect whatever. 222. The Wolf and the Young Lamb Taking Refuge in a Temple. A wolf pursued a young lamb who took refuge in a temple. The wolf called out to it and said that the sacrificer would offer it up to the god if he found the lamb there. But the lamb replied, "Ah, well, I would prefer to be a victim of a god than to die by your hand." This fable shows that if one is being driven towards death, it is better to die with honor. 223. The Wolf and the Old Woman. A hungry wolf was prowling in search of food. Coming to a certain place, he heard a child crying and an old woman who was saying to it, "Don't cry any more, or else I will give you to the wolf at once." The wolf thought that the old woman meant it, so he stopped and waited for a long time. When evening fell, he again heard the old woman cuddling the little one and saying to it, "If the wolf comes here, my child, we will kill him." After hearing these words, the wolf went on his way, saying, "In this farm they say one thing and do another." This fable addresses itself to people who do not match their words with their deeds. 224. The Wolf and the Heron. A wolf swallowed a bone and looked everywhere for relief from his predicament. He met a heron who, for a certain fee, agreed to retrieve the bone. So the heron lowered his head into the wolf's throat, pulled out the bone, and then claimed his promised fee. "Listen, pal," replied the wolf, "isn't it enough to have pulled your head safe and sound from a wolf's throat? What more do you want?" This fable shows that the most we can expect from bad people is that they won't commit an injury against us in addition to their lack of gratitude. 225. The Wolf and the Horse. A wolf crossed an arable field and discovered that it contained barley. As he couldn't eat it, he left it and went on his way. Soon after he met a horse whom he led to the field, telling him he had found some barley. The wolf said, "Rather than eat it myself, I decided to watch over it for you instead, for I very much enjoy the sound of your munching." The horse replied, "Ha, my friend, if wolves could eat barley for their dinner, you would never have preferred the use of your ears to the filling of your stomach." This fable shows that those who are naturally wicked, even when they pride themselves on being good, are not actually believed. 226. The Wolf and the Dog. A wolf saw a huge dog wearing a large wooden restraining collar and asked him, "Who has chained you up and fed you like that?" "A hunter," replied the dog. "Ah, God preserve wolves from him, as much as from hunger and a heavy restraining collar." This fable shows that in misfortune one doesn't even have the pleasures of the stomach. 227. The Wolf and the Lion. One day a wolf seized a sheep from a flock and carried it to his lair. But on his way a lion crossed his path and took the sheep from him. The wolf remained at a safe distance, but complained to the lion, "You have no right to take my property." The lion said to the wolf mockingly, "You came by it honestly yourself, as a gift from a friend, no doubt." Insatiable plunderers and thieves who fall out among themselves when they meet with a setback can learn from this story. 228. The Wolf and the Ass. A wolf became chief over the other wolves and established some general rules to the effect that whatever was caught by hunting would be shared communally. By that means, the wolves would never again be reduced to a shortage of food and thus to eating one another. But an ass came forward and, shaking his mane, said, "The wolf has been inspired by a noble idea. But what about your catch of yesterday, which you have concealed in your lair? Bring it out and share it with the community." The wolf, disconcerted, abolished his laws. Those who seem to legislate according to justice cannot even abide by the rules which they themselves have established and decreed. 229. The Wolf and the Shepherd. A wolf followed a flock of sheep without doing them any harm. At first, the shepherd was fearful of it as an enemy and watched it nervously. But as the wolf kept on following without making any attempt to harm them, he began to look upon it as more of a guardian than an enemy to be wary of. As he needed to go into town one day, he left the sheep with the wolf in attendance. The wolf, seeing his opportunity, hurled himself at the sheep and tore most of them to pieces. When the shepherd returned and saw the lost sheep, he cried out, "It serves me right. How could I have entrusted my sheep to a wolf?" It is the same with men. When you entrust valuables to greedy people, it is natural that you will lose things. 230. The Satisfied Wolf and the Ewe. A wolf, well gorged with food, saw a ewe lying on her back on the ground, unable to right herself. Realizing that she had collapsed from fright, he approached her and reassured her. He promised that if she would utter 3 truths, he would leave her alone. So the ewe began by telling him that she would like not to have to meet him again, or failing that, she would like him to go blind, and thirdly, she wished that wicked wolves would meet violent deaths, so that we would suffer no more harm from you, and you would make no more war against us. The wolf acknowledged her veracity and left her to go her own way. This fable shows that often truth has this effect on one's enemies. 231. The Injured Wolf and the Ewe. A wolf, bitten and injured by some dogs, had fallen to the ground. As he was in no state to hunt for food, he espied a ewe and begged her to fetch him a drink from the nearby stream. "If you give me something to drink, I will find myself something to eat," said the wolf. "But if I give you something to drink," replied the ewe, "it is I who will make you a meal." This fable is aimed at the wrongdoer who lays a hypocritical trap. 232. The Lamp. Intoxicated with oil, a lamp threw out a vivid light, boasting that it was more brilliant than the sun. But a gust of wind blew up and it was extinguished instantly. Someone relit it and said, "Light up, lamp, and be assured that the light of the stars is never eclipsed." You mustn't be dazzled by pride when you are held in high repute, for all that is required is extraneous to us. 233. The Diviner. A diviner was sitting plying his trade in the agora. Suddenly, someone rushed up to him and said that the front door of his house was wide open and the contents gone. The diviner leapt up in consternation and ran home, gasping to see what had happened. A passer-by who saw him running called out, "Hey there, you who pride yourself on foretelling the future for others, can't you foresee what will happen to yourself?" One could apply this fable to people who order their own lives woefully, but who dabble in controlling affairs which are not their concern. 234. The Bees and Zeus. Begrudging the honey they gave to men, the bees went to Zeus to ask him to give them the power to kill with their stings anyone approaching their honeycombs. Indignant at their envy, Zeus condemned the bees to lose their sting barbs every time they stung someone and to die as a result. This fable is applicable to those who suffer as a result of their own envy. 235. The Beekeeper. A man broke into a beekeeper's abode and, in his absence, stole some honey and honeycombs. When the beekeeper returned and saw the empty hives, he stopped to examine them. but the bees flying back home from foraging and finding him there attacked him and stung him terribly. "Wretched creatures!" he exclaimed. "You let the person who stole your combs escape with impunity, and you mercilessly persecute me, who takes care of you." Thus, it often happens that, through ignorance, we are not on guard against our enemies, and that we drive off our friends and hold them in suspicion. 236. The begging priests of Cybele. Some begging priests had an ass which carried their possessions from place to place. Now, one day, the ass dropped down dead from exhaustion, so they skinned it, made kettle drums from its skin, and thus continued to make use of it. Then, later on, they met another group of begging priests, who asked them where their ass was. "Oh, he is dead," they replied. "But he gets just as many blows as he did when he was alive." Thus, sometimes, even when servants are freed from slavery, they are not necessarily rid of the burdens of servitude. 237. The mice and the house ferrets. The mice and the house ferrets were at war. Now the mice, always seeing themselves beaten, convened a committee because they imagined it must be the lack of a leader which caused their setbacks. They elected some generals by raising their hands. Now the new generals wanted to be distinguished from the ordinary soldiers, so they fashioned some horns and fastened them to their heads. The battle got under way, and it happened that the army of the mice was defeated by the house ferrets. The soldiers fled towards their holes, into which they escaped easily. But the generals, not being able to enter because of their horns getting stuck, were caught and devoured. Thus, vainglory is often a cause of misfortune. 238. The fly. A fly had fallen into an earthen pot full of boiled meat. On the verge of drowning in the broth, she said to herself, "I've eaten, I've drunk, I've had a bath. Death can come, it doesn't matter to me." This fable shows that people easily surrender to death when it comes without any suffering. 239. The flies. Some flies had found some spilled honey in a cellar and started to eat it. It was such a sweet feast that they couldn't stop, but their feet became stuck to the spot so that they couldn't take flight, and as they began to suffocate they said, "How wretched we are! We are dying for a moment's pleasure." Gluttony is often the cause of much harm. 240. The ant. Once upon a time the ant used to be human, a farmer who, not content with his own yield, kept an envious eye on his neighbor's harvest and stole it. Zeus was angered by his greed and changed him into the insect that we all call an ant. But, even though his body was altered, his character was not. To this day he still traverses the fields, collecting other people's wheat and barley and storing it up for himself. This fable shows that even a severe punishment doesn't change people who by nature are bad characters.